Hello, I'm Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series where I, Tom Martin, lifelong journalist who has produced stories for Diane Sawyer at ABC News, Good Morning America, and for Charles Kuralt at CBS Sunday Morning, and many other places along the way, have an opportunity to ask thought-provoking questions of my colleague, David Parker. David is the author of two excellent books, which I highly recommend, Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative, hence the title of our podcast series. And David is joining us from San Francisco. Hey, David, how are you today?
Hey, I'm fine. Nice to see you, Tom. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. There's no shortage of thought-provoking stories in the news these days, as I'm sure you'd agree. We're just talking about homeless challenge and college loans being paid off, and a million things. And that kind of reminded me that I thought it might be good to go back to basics. I know. Tell us again how you went back to school. For those of you who may be watching this as your very first introduction to our podcast series, you are a lifelong educator as well as an entrepreneur and a jazz musician, and you chose to go back to school, right?
Well, yeah. People go to school to maybe learn how to do something. I went to school to learn how I did something, because I have instinct for real estate investment, and I have instinct for teaching. I have instinct for jazz, and all my writing is very instinctual. My editor hates that I don't use an outline. It pours out for me, and I edit so many times that it looks like it was planned when it's done. But that's not how I start. And I had a realization from childhood, that just epiphanies, that income and wealth were two separate matters, unrelated. And I started to write, and my wife says, I think you better take a class in economics. This is okay. So after having a college degree, a teaching credential, a master's degree in music, I went back to school and I sat in an economics class on the graduate level, and I go, whoa, I can't do this. So I went to the undergraduate level and took economics 1. And it says, you better take some math too. Oh my God. So I got carried away. I took 67 units of math and economics in a row. Took every class our school had to offer. It was called Golden Gate University in San Francisco. Wow. Catered to adults quite a bit. Then I started to rewrite, and I wrote the book Income and Wealth, because now I had personal experience and I had some background. So what it is scholarly writing in political economy from an entrepreneurial mind versus an academic mind. So it reads differently, and examples are from business as opposed to a classroom.
Yeah,
so it's an interesting book for anybody who's listening. They would like it.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent book. I learned a lot, certainly, and from a San Francisco Conservative as well. Both are great books. I was listening to basically a lecture this morning where the instructor, again, he was successful in the real estate sector, and he said a great thing about a great teacher is that they can sort of compress time. If you just went out there by trial and error to learn things the hard way and make mistakes, I guess, like Thomas Edison and the electric light bulb, perhaps, it could take you quite a long time making all those mistakes. But when you have a great teacher, a great professor, especially somebody who's immersed in a field right now, as you are, as a businessman, as an investor, as an entrepreneur, someone like that, like you, to point out important truths and sort of fundamentals that you could expedite that journey, and it'd really be very beneficial. So that's what I'd like to focus on today, if that's all right. Are there certain laws that you think, laws of economics, that people could benefit from knowing?
Well, let me refute a tiny bit your opening introduction. Andrew Carnegie, he says, if you really want to make a fortune, don't go to college. You're like an athlete, or you're like an 18-year-old mathematician. Your mind is active. You shouldn't be just taking 25 different courses, because you have to start at the bottom. You really have to learn by trial and error. You have to do what Edison did. You have to make those mistakes, because otherwise they're not in you.
Yeah.
When you recognize a similar situation, I did that and I messed it up the first time. Now I know what it is. So
That's a good point. That makes
I
sense.
would advise students to drop out.
Yeah.
If I was going to and start what they want to do and make the mistakes.
That makes
If
sense.
you don't start from the bottom, you're not going to rise to the top because you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
And sweeping the floor or putting mail in the mailroom, you learn a lot. You just don't stay there is the point.
Yeah.
You got 2 weeks, that's fine. You're on to the next job, but you work your way up. You're not going to go to the top if you don't start at the bottom.
Sure. Makes sense. Well, perhaps I should say, and I appreciate that correction because that does make a lot of sense. Last summer, for example, I offered a course for authors. You don't need it because I'm enjoying working with you, of course, but do-it-yourself public relations for authors. And so that was sort of trial and error. I've never taught a class of any kind before. And so there were certain things that I learned by just putting myself out there and I guess making mistakes. So I definitely hear what you're saying there. But so maybe I should rephrase it and just say, maybe after a lot of trial and error and success, as you have enjoyed and you are still enjoying, you're still very active out there. Certain fundamental truths have emerged, and maybe it's helpful to shine a light on them.
Right.
Can you do that for us?
Yeah, there are the laws of economics that if you don't know, you're swimming, and you can make huge mistakes. And well, on a grand scale, one law of economics is called comparative advantage. And a nation can have an absolute advantage in everything. Like the US can probably do everything better than everybody else, or certainly as well as anybody else. But you can't do everything. And so you have to choose what you do really best, that you do maybe a little bit better than somebody else, and then don't do anything else and just concentrate on that one thing. America should not be making inexpensive manufacturing parts. We should be making high technology. A country like South Korea is doing as well as we are economically. And a few years ago, they were making junk. And after World War II, Japan was making junk. I remember as a kid growing up, bad product. Oh, that was made in Japan. That was the expression. And today it's the opposite. If it's made in Japan, it's probably good. It's probably better than our products.
Yeah.
And today, that cheap market, China has that cheap market, but that doesn't last. China is going to find themselves in the same problem as Korea and Japan and they're going to have such a high standard of living that nobody will make those cheap products anymore, and they're out of business. And it'll be India. And when India figures it out, there'll be nobody left to make anything poor.
Interesting challenge. Yes.
We have met people coming across the border into Texas, and on one level, we're stopping it because it's illegal. And a second level, we need those people.
Right. Interesting.
China has that same problem now. They have they're sorry they had that one-child policy. They are short. They have a huge manpower shortage.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what unfolds from that. I just want to take a quick minute for viewers and listeners joining us midstream here. This is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin, as the journalist, asking questions, thought-provoking questions. I've spent years with ABC and CBS and CNN and so on. And I'm certainly enjoying my conversation with David Parker, author of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. And we're talking about, that is an interesting change, turn of events, I guess. I certainly noticed that in my lifetime when I was a kid. If you'd see something stamped with "Made in Japan," you'd think this is a piece of refuse. But nowadays it's sophistication and something to be coveted. How did the Asian countries pull that off? I mean, there are some great success stories in Asia, right?
people think that their governments back them up. And that's why American governments should back up our companies. But the companies that the government backed kind of failed. The companies that they didn't touch, those did well, really well. They didn't touch the automobile, Honda or Toyota. They didn't mess with them. The government didn't, or electronics, their televisions and their computers. The government had nothing to do with that. But that's what those countries excelled in. It's almost a lesson, not for government to not interfere in the economy. And then those Asian countries tend to save their money much more than we do, maybe half their salary, and they invested in their own stock markets. And that's not taxed like it is here. So to encourage that, and they don't live on credit. They save and they work long hours, and they're focused, and that's a pretty good combination. They're focused on the product, they're saving money, they're working hard. Let that be a lesson to you.
Yeah, is that a formula that we can replicate here in the United States?
Yeah, America was kind of known for being a hardworking nation, and we just shouldn't be making stuff that other countries can make for much less. And so we shouldn't be protecting all kinds of low-income jobs. We shouldn't have tariffs. You know, Athens, 5th century Athens was one of the great centuries of all kind. But they had a lucky break. 100 years before, 6th century Athens, BC, somebody had the bright idea of asking this guy named Solon, Solon. He was a philosopher, but an extraordinarily successful merchant. He says, well, our economy is floundering here. He says to Athens, stop producing everything. Just plant some olive trees. The soil in Athens is rotten. Don't compete with farming nations all around you. Stop farming. Just plant olive trees, take the oil, put them in beautiful painted pots, use your artists, and use your great shipping, which you naturally do, and just ship olive oil in painted pots all over the Mediterranean. And they became rich. They became really rich. And then they had whatever that genius was that recognized that Solon was right. That's comparative advantage. We have people today still haven't figured that out. We have people saying we're going to have tariffs and we're going to protect our industries. And he says, forget your industries, throw them away. Just do the one or two things that you can do really well, and then just blast the market. Blast the market with that.
Interesting.
It sprung a civilization that's probably the greatest ever in the history of mankind. 5th century Athens.
Interesting.
It's
I can't resist throwing in
your moment of genius in mankind, and we're not paying attention to it.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's a great story, a great example of focus, as you said. It's interesting. That reminds me a little bit of a number of years ago, 10, 12 years ago, I read a great biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson, who had, I guess, Jobs saw that Isaacson had written about Benjamin Franklin, said, I'm in that category, Ben Franklin and other geniuses, and you should write about me. And it was a great book, is a great book. And he said that during those times, certainly Jobs and Wozniak started Apple, in I guess the family garage. But after it took off to some level of success, Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company. And I think the CEO they found was from Pepsi, if I remember correctly. And so he said, we're going to diversify our product line and have 20, 30 different.
There you go.
And it sounded like they were heading down the wrong road after what you just said.
Absolutely, yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. So it's one of my themes in all my writing, both my books, that there's timeless laws of money, timeless laws of government, and why are we pretending they're not there, or thinking it doesn't apply to us. It applies. It does apply to us.
Yeah, really fascinating. So, well, I tell you what, I believe in that old expression, leave them wanting more. So I think we're going to stop at law number 1, because are there 4 that you want to share with us?
Not today.
Okay, so we'll in a future conversation, we will hear about number 2 and number 3 and number 4. I come away from every one of these conversations having learned something, which I love. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I just want to remind all of our viewers and listeners, be sure to pick up copies of David's books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. You can do that by visiting his website, davidparkeressays.com, or by going to Amazon. So thanks, David. It was great to see you.
Thank you. You can say that all my writings have a historical perspective. I talked about Solon throughout all my books. That's part of their interest. I go back thousands of years to say, this is what's happening today. Let's not ignore the lessons we learned from the past.
Absolutely. No, I love that quality. Both books are excellent. So thank you very much.